That's,
Yeah, it's okay. It's been recorded, but it's only like internal usage. So it's fine.
oh, that's fine.
And we're going to cut the beginning and of the official recording. It's okay. This should be an easy webinar. We just talk about the research more than anything and give our opinion.
You got it. Beautiful.
I'm going to get my water ready and everything. Julia, we okay? We should be getting a read. Paul, you take your time. Okay. We'll get you. Oh yeah, we have attendees. Welcome, folks. We're early. We like to get up early, have a coffee, gather, think about the data, think about how the world of customer first is. What a lovely day it is in New York with the rain about to fall in. Paul, how is it on the West Coast today? Or too early to look outside?
It is. The sun is out, skies are blue, although we are still got a bit of fog that's clearing off the hills here, but it looks like it's going to be another beautiful day.
What do you think about the Euros? And let's talk a little bit about football. What do you think is going to happen? Are you following?
I was most surprised to see that England have already qualified for the last 16 without playing their last game, which is a bit of a weird scenario. But this Euro has just been, well, obviously it's a year late, right? So it's Euro 2020. This was the first year that they decided to run it across multiple hosts, which I think is, I don't know, I'm an elder member of the audience, of the community. I'm a bit of a purist. So I'd still like the tournaments where they would host it in a country, just because of the gravitas it created and the sense of community and a country would, especially back in the day when the host country would actually qualify, would ultimately qualify, right? So it would create a level of fever across, but now, having it spread out, and I think also with all the stadiums only being able to be filled to a certain amount, it's taken a bit away from it. But no, I think there's been some great stories, been some great football as well. I think that the story of the tournament is going to be Denmark. I think it was, they played incredible yesterday against Russia. And, I think the advent of VAR is just incredible. I was watching some of the highlights of the Denmark game, and Denmark at the time needed to win by 2 clear goals. And Belgium needed to beat Finland, and you heard this massive roar in the stadium. It's because everyone on the phone had heard that Belgium had scored, and then about 2 minutes later there was this big sort of ooh, because VAR had said no, it was a disallowed goal, and then Russia had scored. So this sort of within the space of 3 minutes, sort of the range of emotions that we're experiencing in Copenhagen was just
crazy. It's
incredible.
VAR is a concept I love because you want to be on the air of truth, just like within tennis, where you want to be able to see it because it moves so fast. My son is starting to play soccer now properly. You've been in that world, so of kids sports, and like literally the last goal of the tournament, the ref called it offside, even though it was from a throw-in, which you cannot do offside of a throw-in, which is ridiculous. And like, where's the VAR? All the parents getting up, getting annoyed. And of course, in 9-year-old tournaments, VAR doesn't really exist yet, and not budgeted. So it's I don't know. First of all, I don't care about some mishap. It's part of the drama, but it is fun to see England really having a good spot. Portugal being great, but then getting hammered is always, Germany always wins, right?
Yeah, I listen, I think once you get to the finals, the last 16, I think if you look at Italy playing incredibly well, Germany obviously didn't start well, but performance against Portugal was incredible. Portugal, you'd argue they just had a bad day, ran into a wall. Yeah. Belgium looking strong, France looking strong. I think it's going to be a really competitive last 16. It's going to be some great football to watch on TV.
Well, yeah, I'm for that. Listen, sports is part of the fun. We'll get started in about 3 minutes, everybody. We're just getting gathered here, talking about football, talking about soccer, talking about the Euros, and then Olympics coming up then. I'm just want a great season of Premier League. I want Liverpool to come back a little bit after being completely out of whack. With many excuses.
Yeah, well, I think it just the sequencing as well, right? I think that the because of COVID, the previous season not completing till the end of July, and then the new season, they didn't have much of an off season, and then injuries, and it's it's going to be an interesting season. I think Man United are coming to the fore. Tottenham you know, you got the likes of Leicester and Everton and even West Ham. Who would have thought West Ham would have been competitive? I mean, it'll be another great season. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think it's gonna be great. So, folks, we're doing an analysis of soccer and football because that's part of the fun that we have. And I mean, honestly, who can spend $150 million on a player in these times? Let's see. That will be interesting, right? The Harry Kane dilemma. Hey, Reed, welcome to the webinar.
Hi,
a lot of folks already in. We're just gathering. And in about a minute, we're going to start jamming on this amazing webinar regarding the Frost and Sullivan research around everything. We're going to talk about everything to do with customer experience and about content and technical documentation and how that affects the journey and adoption. So we'll another 30, 40 seconds and we'll jump in. Sure. I love the difference between the backgrounds. I'm in a classic New York apartment with like the bricks and everything. Paul is in his like really, really completely amazing bedroom that he took off one of his sons that he chased out.
That's right. We kicked one of the sons out. He had the best internet, so we took over the room. No, I didn't kick him out. He's moved up to Poland. He's gone up to school for the summer. So, but yeah, I think I told you last time I was going to take this all down, but I had so many compliments from colleagues and customers. I'm just going to keep it.
Good man. All right, it's 2 minutes after. People are still gathering, but I think it's time for the main event. Are we ready? All right, so welcome everybody. Welcome Irit and Paul. Why don't we start the slides? Usually I like to have conversations over Zoom and talk, but now we have some good stuff to show. So I think we'll excuse ourselves this time, guys, right? So we'll have a little bit of talking about the slides and go into them. And when somebody's not talking, we'll go on mute and we're going to have people monitor the Q&A and chat, and it's going to be great. So why are we here today? Well, many reasons. A, people just love talking to me. I don't know why, but Paul knows we've been doing this for a while, so it's fun. But mainly it's about focusing on the great research that Zoomin partnered with Frost and Sullivan on to really go deep to understand what aspects of technical content and what aspects of people, customers, users, self-service experience is working, not working, and why. We want to give people tools, and that's why we're going to go and translate that research into the takeaways. And for that, if you can go on the next slide, please, we have a little bit of, housekeeping to say, who are the amazing people who joined us today? So first and forward is Irit. Why don't you tell us who you are, and thank you for joining us.
Sure. Thank you, guys. Great to be here. So just in a nutshell, so I had consulting in Israel. For the past several years, what I do is basically help companies, technology companies in different business decisions, starting with market, product validation and surveys until go-to-market strategy planning and decision-making. In a nutshell about Frost and Sullivan, so that's a consulting and research company, a global one. We have 40 offices. This research was done by our customer research global practice led by Michael. So we specialize in building questionnaires and data analysis and definitely bringing on the experts. So that's in a nutshell.
Thank you. And when you talk about experts, of course, I'm going to introduce the guru and SME of everything CX, CS, support, and CCO. Paul, welcome.
Hey, Alan, welcome. Thank you for having me. Great to be here. Paul Brook. I head up customer success at HashiCorp, and throughout my career, I've always been on the post-sales side of the equation, running support organizations, customer success organizations, professional services, renewals, and education. This is a topic that's very dear to my heart. I started my career as a support engineer. I've worked through pretty much every role within a support organization, expanded my horizons into customer success, ProServe, renewals. But for me, this is all about the customer experience. We don't exist as brands, as companies, without having happy, satisfied, loyal customers. And it really comes back to the customer experience. How can we meet them where they're at how can we honor and acknowledge their preferences, and how can we get them what they need just in time to help them, have the most, the best experience, best journey with us as a brand, as a company, as a vendor.
Love it. When we talk about journeys, so let's talk about the story of our journey today. The story of the journey today in the slides that we see, next slide, please, is about 3 parts. Just like everything in the world has 3 parts. I don't know why, but it makes sense to us as humans, right? Part 1 is about, let's look at the data and the research, the deep research that Irit is going to talk about, that reveals what is the state of UX for technical content, or what I'm going to start calling is UCX, user content experience, terminology that I just created up, but not, why not? And then it will tell us about, well, okay, that's the state, but there's also a second piece, which is the gap between what we as companies really think our user experience is, our executives, the CXS leaders that we researched and interviewed, versus what users told us, users of technical documentation. And then we'll take those 2 together and say, well, here's what the impact on the business we see. So let's go in and talk a little bit about the methodology and what this research actually covered. Irit, if you can talk about that for 1 or 2 minutes and tell us a little bit, what did we actually do?
Sure, gladly. So customer surveys is our bread and butter, as I said before. This was custom made for this specific topic, as you described, by 3 parts. So we've actually surveyed more than 200 participants. As you can see in the slide, we've had 166 heavy users who use technical documentation portals. We had different criteria for those. And we also had 57 leaders. Leaders were defined as C-level, different VPs, CEOs, till director level. So that's how the survey was constructed. We had a specific questionnaire that you probably know. It was conducted last month and finalized beginning of this month, June. And we had different distribution of countries, but the main focus was US, Canada, and UK. So that was the methodology. You can continue to the next slide. In terms of the breakdown, so as you mentioned, we have 2 target audience. So we had the users and we had the leaders. So if you look at both, basically we had around 65% software companies in both leaders and users. If we look at the leaders, so we also have 35% of hardware companies. That's the breakdown. If you look at the users, then the breakdown is a bit more complicated. We have 64% software companies and the rest is hardware, manufacturer, finance, and healthcare. So you can see the percentages here.
Excellent. Thank you. So now it's come to get into the data itself. And what does it tell us? All right, let's move on and start with the questions. Irit, why don't you tell us a little bit what the question actually says? We'll let you tell us the question, and then Paul and I will geek out about what that means to us. I think that'll be fun.
Sure. I'll let you guys to explain and translate this. So the first question we asked participants was, to what extent do you agree with the following statement? So looking for technical documentation is a painful experience. And so as you see, 46% actually answered that this is a painful experience for them.
That sounds like quite a bit to me. It's like nearly
that's
1
a lot, actually. That's near to 50%. That is a lot.
What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I think a lot of the time we design from the inside out, right? We design it from, we build content from our point of view first, and then eventually we iterate back to what our customers need. I think that's probably one of the biggest shifts, is always try and put yourself in your customer's shoes, understand the experience that they desire, the journey that they're looking to complete, and then build and orchestrate your content around that. Whereas typically we build content within silos, right? It's around product, it's around feature, it's around maybe use case. But it's then being able to orchestrate it, stitch it together through the lens that's a lot more understandable by the customer, and quite frankly, more easily findable by your customer and by your end user.
Well, let's talk really about the finding them. I think the next 3 slides, let's go into each one of them in a row if you can, and then we'll summarize them. Really tell us about findability and how that state of the business is. So go ahead, Amit.
Right, so we asked this answer from different angles. So the first question was, how many sites or portals such as documentation and community do you usually need to visit before you find the right one? So the answers was 3, meaning the users have to go through 3 different sites or portals, which is definitely a lot. I have to say that's a mean score, which means that a high percentage of it is higher even than 3. So just to take that into account. Next slide. So the question was, based on your experience using search bars in documentation portals, how many searches do you usually need to get to the desired content? So same answers, 3. I have to say that it is still a mean score. I don't remember the exact percentage. It was around, I think 30% actually said it's even higher than 3. So just imagine to yourself, what does it mean? And last question, how often do you find yourself searching for answers in a large file, such as a PDF? So the answer was 51% of times, which means half of the users have to find themselves looking for these large files.
Okay, so I need to translate. So
definitely,
apparently the number 3 keeps coming up a lot. It's probably just that we use 3, and 3 is like the minimum threshold of terrible for us, maybe. It sounds like from the research we've done, which is comprehensive for deep technical users and a lot of like verticals and geography, shows us that people, if you go a slide even up again, people go and need 3 times to find the right place. And then they need to actually go in, that's this one. The next one is, if you go to the next slide, please, then in the 3 places, how many times do you actually need to search 3 times once you find the right place to find actually on the search element, the right document. And then most of the time, this is the percentage we saw that it's actually not the right document. You go into a big document to find it. The word experience comes to mind, Paul. What do you think about it? Would you say that's not horrible experience, but is it just the way things are today? I don't think that's how we do it in our day-to-day life in B2C.
No, I think at the end of the day, again, putting yourself in your customer's shoes is that, they're trying to complete a task, they're trying to get something done, they're trying to execute, and now they're having to down tools, and now they're searching, right? And I always find it puts a little shiver down my spine, but typically the first place where people go is Google, right? They go Google and they start searching, they get a list, and it's ordered as the way Google wants to order it, not necessarily by relevance or by persona or by sort of place in the journey that you're at. And then you find yourself in this sort of set of rabbit warrens trying to find that piece of content that's specific to what you're looking for. And the fact that folks are having to control F through these massive PDF files, I mean, that's not necessarily ideal. I guess if you've found the right PDF file, then you're on the right track, but then you've got to find the right content. And then you hope that it's documented in a way that reflects the problem that you're trying to solve for as well. So there's lots of ifs, thens, and buts, and no way through that journey are we measuring the sentiment of the customer experience, because they're outside of our domain, they're outside of our control, right? So for me, it's how do you meet the customers where they're at, which is on your estate and your platform, on your product. And then how do you contextually serve them content based on what they're doing and where they're physically at on your real estate. So no, I'm not surprised as a long-time support professional. It does deflate me a little bit that we're still at this point. But also I think there's some great brands out there that are really looking to conquer this challenge and meet their customers where they're at and provide that contextual support just in time.
Yeah, I love it. So I want to add another point here. I think it's important for us to all agree. This is not data that is supposed to get us to completely the shock and awe moment that says, oh, the state of experience is terrible. It's not. It's a maturity model. It's a path towards making sure that you map where each person or user or super user or admin is on their journey. Make sure that you give them the right content or answers, because people are not usually looking for the content, but they're looking for an answer for a question or something specific that is actionable. And then once you analyze those journeys, you can give them the right content at the right time that delivers to them the answer, I think is what you're alluding to, Paul. Are you feeling that journey mapping and understanding the journeys of users is something that is top of mind today for CCOs, CS leaders, and CX leaders as well?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, in my world, we always talk in context of customer journey. We always talk in terms of the journey to value for the customer. We talk about the practitioner journey. We talk about the architect journey, and we know along that journey there are going to be moments of truth. There's going to be moments of value which are critical to customer success. And our challenge is to meet them at that point in time. Obviously, in a high touch model, you rely on your senior support engineers, your customer success professionals. You're doing it through a curated white glove experience. But we all have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of customers to support. And as we go further down the revenue stack, the challenge is how do we democratize our content, our knowledge, our best practice, so we don't inadvertently discriminate against our customers because they're only paying a certain amount, they only qualify for a certain level of support. So we constantly talk about the customer journey. Yeah. We constantly talk about no customer left behind. And we always think about how do we democratize the content and learning and be able to provide it to our customers based on that point of time. So understanding where they are in the journey, where they are in terms of real estate, the function that they're trying to complete, and then be able to provide them with the right contextual knowledge and content at that point in time, super critical.
Yeah, love it. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Let's go to the next data point, Irit, if you can take us to that one, the one after this, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about it. Go ahead.
Sure. So the next question we asked users was, how often do you find the content in the documentation portal to be irrelevant or not updated? So the overall answer was actually 40% of the times. So imagine yourself.
Yeah, so when I look at this, if you find the journey and you map the journey and you enable people to find the right content and approach, this is a little bit unfortunate, because if they go to the right place on their own and trying to self-serve, which is part of what we try to do in our day-to-day life, if the content isn't there, or they can't find it, then unfortunately the only resource I would assume, Paul, is go call support, go file a ticket, or go email your CSM. And we're all trying to get people to stay in the journey and not break the journey continuity, but rather find what they need. So this is kind of unfortunately a lose-lose, because the customer is not happy because they were looking for something in the place that they were supposed to find it, and then the CSM and rep is probably less fortunate because they need to go find something and give them information that is not strategic, but actually is a little bit of time waste. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, listen, I think it's all the perennial challenge. It's always as products evolve, as solutions evolve, we've got to make sure our documentation evolves with it. So it's always a challenge to have that done just in time. So there's always going to be documentation that's out there that may not quite be in sync. And it is a full-time role to focus on your knowledge and content management. But I think there's ways that we can soften the pain here a bit, right? So as you think about, put yourself in the shoes of the customer, within your content portal or knowledge portal, if you give your customer the ability to say, no, this didn't help, right? So give them the ability to provide that feedback. And then from there, if it didn't help, give them the option there to chat or log a support ticket, versus right now, it's a dead end. They got to go fire up another URL. They've got to log on again. They've got to explain themselves. And we've now put drag on the customer experience again. So even within this, potentially poor experience, we can make it a softer landing by, giving the customer options in terms of being able to engage you in the most frictionless way and provide insight in terms of why they felt the content wasn't helpful.
Yeah. Well, okay. So we talked about, thank you for that, Paul. We talked about the current state, which is what we wanted to do about what is user experience regarding content, technical documentation, finding answers where they're looking. And unfortunately, but realistically, we understand that it's a little bit to be desired, as we usually quote in football, where somebody strikes the ball completely way to the side and not even on target. So it is a bit to be desired, how we reach a better state of getting content, not to have to search 3 times, but actually enabling users to have the right experience to find the content that they need. That's what the research has shown. Now, in our storyline, as we said, we have two more parts. The second part is we want to understand the gap. Very British of us to mind the gap, to understand the gap between what the perception is of leaders of customer success, support, and so forth, of the experience of the users versus what actually the users have told us. So Irit, why don't you take us a little bit through the data and let's talk about it.
Sure. So the answers here are a bit more complex because we compare between the users and the leaders. So you can see the users in gray color and the leaders in yellow color. So the question was, when seeking technical answers regarding a specific product or software, where do you turn to first? So just look at the difference. I mean, users say they go to documentation portals. It's 52% of the users who go to those portals. If you look at the leaders as opposed to the users, 47% of those go to search engines. So that addresses, I think, your previous slide about the gaps. You can see the very significant gaps between what leaders do and users do.
It's an interesting one. This one is this data point actually a little bit surprises me and a little bit, I think it's a very good one to pay attention to. Because by default, if we think about our day-to-day, to find something, we either go to your Amazon or you go to Google for like any random search. You don't usually go to a website unless you already have an app. I'm talking about not apps. I'm talking about mainly search-related items. Users, just like with apps and customers, will go to where they know the content that of relevance with deep contextual information should be. And that's what this is telling us. However, we see that unfortunately, a lot of leaders of customer experience, customer support, input the data they've told us, this is not subjective, will believe that users first of all go to a generic search. So I don't know if Paul, if you have any opinions on that. To me, it says that we need to meet people where they are. It's all about journey first, but I don't know what your thoughts would be.
You know, I think that's spot on, Alon. I think it's meet them where they're at, meet them where they're most commonly going to be. And I think again it goes back to force, and it's hard but to continue to force yourself to be in your users and your customers' shoes, right? And look at this from designing from the outside in versus the inside out, because inside out we all have our own biases, right? So I think it comes back to putting the customer in the middle of the equation, putting the customer in the middle of the room and figuring out how do you best solve for your customers' needs, and obviously balancing all the various sort of internal needs and requirements as part of that. But yeah, it's always a challenge to force yourself to think about the customer first. And just to say, I had a great. I'm going to take this tip and use it in once we finally get back to being in offices. But I had a customer of mine. We were talking about customer first and no customer left behind. And she was saying what they do in their company is every internal meeting they actually have a chair, and that empty chair is for the customer. Oh. Right? And they have assigned to the, and they always want to make sure that it's visibly present that there is a customer, and they want to make sure that they continue to keep the customer in all of their discussions. So I found that pretty interesting. So
I think it's cool. I hope nobody comes by mistake, joins the meeting late and sits on the customer. That could be a little unfortunate, but yeah. I mean, by the way, we encourage the attendees on the chat to share their ideas. How do you enforce a customer-centric culture? How do you facilitate that across CSMs and remote teams? And of course, any questions or any comments you have on the data and the topic we have, just like here, as Paul alluded to, it is where you start your journey. Typically, as we know, the people are going, the technical users, which is the audience, go where they think the data should, the content should be. So this is one gaps we see. Let's go to the next one, please, Ray.
Sure. So next question was, overall, how would you describe your average experience in looking for relevant technical content for professional usage? So again, there's a big difference between users and leaders. So you can see the users, 42% find it quite challenging, the experience, while leaders say 65% that the experience is quite easy.
Yeah, the data here. So what I think is important about when we query people and get their objective, it's not subjective because all they're doing is telling what they feel, is this is about the experience that they're feeling. And experience is something we all care about, but sometimes it's hard to quantify. And what we see with a lot of our partners and a lot of the people we work with the customers is that the experience of finding content, if you go to the place you expected, should be easy. But however, that's what we think. And that's what the yellow here is telling us, the companies, the leaders. But people have spoken, the crowd has spoken. We need to understand, even when you go to the destination of choice, of expectancy, let's call it, it is still actually split between easy and challenging. So some things are quite relevant to find, FAQ, maybe tips and tricks, maybe things. But when you have an abundant quantity of content, answers, FAQs, documents, like most multi-product or bigger companies have, it probably starts to get a little bit challenging to set through that. And at the end of the day, after 3 times, people will revert and go to try and find the answer somewhere else, which is another human, or file a ticket. And we know that's not a great experience. So this is very interesting data. Thank you for revealing that. Let's go to the next data point. Thank you.
Sure. So when you enter a technical content portal, how often are you confident that you'll find the answers you're looking for? So again, mind the gap. So users say 60%, okay? They're confident in 60%, and leaders almost 90%. So that's 50% difference in the answers. In terms of survey, this is a huge difference.
Yes, so what I'm seeing here is that users, so 2 out of 3 users roughly will tell us that they're confident they're going to find us. But of the leaders, it's like they say only 1 out of 5, or actually like 1 out of 10 on average is not going to find it. So most of people, it's a little bit of like a gap here. Paul, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. This one is a little bit more too much of a gap in my view.
Yeah, no, I think it is. It's the number inside the number. I think, as Rick mentioned, it's like 50-60% delta between the point of view. Again, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but there's obviously a bit of a disconnect here as leaders in terms of understanding our customers' experience. And I think whatever we can do as organizations to be able to really harbor our customers' experience, find the right vehicles to capture their feedback, doing that just in time, in product, in motion, super critical. Creating those closed feedback loops, root cause, corrective actions, super critical. And then really, I always find when you validate the data through a customer story and a customer experience, it really then, I think it resonates more with if you're definitely trying to drive a change. It's not just a number, it's not just a data point, but here's this customer, that customer, here's a group of customers, and here's their feedback based on and this was their experience. By the way, let me show you their experience, and boy, that's a bit cringeworthy, and that wasn't very elegant, and this is where they fell down. And by the way, this is the comment they cared to leave us. Thank you, customer, for taking the time. So I think if you can always pull together those feedback loops where you're supporting the data through objective customer feedback, it really will help you drive those those initiatives to really improve customer experience around content and knowledge and self-service.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Sure. So almost last question, but not yet. For the transactions you were involved in, to what extent did the technical content of the product or service have an influence on the purchase decision? So here that while 99% of customers said they are checking technical content pre-purchase, only 59% of the leaders think they do.
Wow. Okay, so I think comment a little bit about. So experiences is not just about being a post-acquisition, a customer, user, and all that. Customer experience today in most companies as a CMO is everywhere. It starts with awareness, education, all the way to buying. And then even at purchase, your customer success usually starts because you want to be able to know how you're going to get served after you actually become a client. This is talking a lot about everybody who is actually a technical user, decision maker, whatever you are in the totem chain, it's important to understand the content is actually 99 for me means everybody. Okay, there's 1% that is not, but I'll round it up to 100. All customers or future customers that are now prospects look at some kind of technical content, a little bit of data sheets, a little bit of content around the people that are going to be, users, what did users say about it, community, app notes, or like information, videos, and so forth. So technical related content, documentation or not, is relevant to every buying decision. Now, I know that customer success usually less looks at pre, but CX and everybody that looks at the experience journeys starts from before. And this is important to understand that the research shows us that users of tomorrow are the prospects of today, and they're still looking for content. And that should be something that is available, sometimes not just gated for a customer behind a firewall, but also available in the right places and easy to find off-site and on-site when you look for them. So I think that's an important piece to actually mention. Thank you for that, Irit. We can go to the next data.
Sure. Okay, so that's different type of questions. How many agreed with saying, I prefer finding answers in documentation portals on my own without having to reach out to any kind of support? And so 81% agreed that they would prefer to do that on their own without support.
Now, I mean, on the one hand, this is like, whoa, everybody wants to self-serve. That's crazy. On the other hand, it's like, well, why don't you take a look in the mirror and go to the Uber, the Netflix, the DoorDash, the anything, the review site, the dark funnel or other mentions that we call today. In your day-to-day life, even in your job, when you search and you research, as we mentioned a lot at the point, about trying to understand a solution, a product, a recommendation, for me, even a marketing methodology for people here, probably about what is the new trend in support and CX. You want to do it on your own. Well, probably while you're listening to a webinar and multitasking, right? And that's one thing that we want to do. So for me, this is not shocking at all. It's just a very strong validation that we should be always putting ourselves in the eyes of the consumer. How does it translate to B2B, Paul, for customers and users in your view?
Yeah, no, I think it's spot on. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think if we look at how we operate as individuals and consumers, as much as I love, the folks at American Express, they've got a great ethos around customer experience, right? Customer service. I'd rather not have to give them a call, right? I'd rather not have to down tools and stop what I'm doing. So I absolutely believe this is the same for B2B. I think if you've got folks who are performing a complex task, if they're they're trying to commit a run, they're trying to sort of configure whatever that the task they're completing, they want minimal disruption. And depending on how interactive support experience is, it could be that they actually have to down tools, literally go to another browser, log in, authenticate themselves again, start explaining their issue. As I mentioned before, I think there's ways that we can soften that blow by contextually embedding support into our products, into our platform, into the customer journey. I think if we can then provide customers with a subset of content that we think is relevant to where they are and what they're doing, and at a minimum, if they do want to engage support, give them a one-click entry point where we capture all the insight we have about them, about what they've looked at. So when we do connect them with a support professional, it can be a super valuable conversation. We're not going back to square one again and describing ourselves and who we are and what we're trying to do.
Yeah. I think we're getting to that in like 2-3 slides regarding the takeaway. So great transition there, Paul. Good for you. Every webinar for me has to be either Tom Cruise or Patrick Swayze or some kind of thing. I think Paul knows me well enough to know that I have to include these guys in. And especially if you can have a Jerry Maguire moment. I mean, how great is that, right? So for me, everything we've talked about now, which is the state of experiences or UCX, user content, user customer experience. We know there's challenges there. They can't find things in the right place sometimes. When they do go to the right place, assumed, it's also still hard to find, or the documents are not optimized to find quick answers or relevance, contextual. And then we talk now about the gap, which is between the leadership of customer-facing orgs and what the users are saying. The gaps are a little bit big, especially regarding where to go in the ease of finding stuff. Now, let's bring those all together and do a help me, help you moment saying, how does this all tell us to help the CSM, the support reps, the documentation people, and pretty much everybody who cares about customers, which I assume most people do. Customers are important people too. We all know that, right? Okay. So let's look at the bottom line net. So Irit, why don't you take us a little bit through this one, and then we'll understand it a bit.
Sure. So the question was, to your best estimate, what percentage of the support calls, open ticket, call support, etc., you made in the past 12 months could have been resolved by yourself if only the content experience on the vendor's channel was more optimized to your needs. So again, question for users and leaders. And actually here you don't see the big difference because users said 52% of times and leaders said 55% of times.
I mean, I'm sorry, this for me is like more than I thought. Yes, there's no big gap between the users and the people in the company, but actually it's a little bit, for me, it's a little bit wow that we know this is like 55%, i.e. more than half of the support related activities, not talking about cost, because you don't know the cost per tickets here, we didn't answer that, but it's probably related or somewhat linear. That's more than half of the aspects of things that they need to go to support to could be solved on their own if they have the right content, the right place, the right time and experience. So for me, that's astounding. And I think we'll translate in a second. Paul, help me out here. What do you think? Is this realistic or blown up?
No, I think this is realistic, and I think this is probably the one slide where the gap between user and leaders is actually probably the closest, right? So we have violent agreement. You know, so could you eliminate 50% of your incoming call volume, ticket volume? Probably not, but if this is, you know, and I have no reason to doubt this data, it resonates with me, but just pose yourself the question. I ask the audience, what would you do if you could free up 25% of your support budget, right? If you could reduce your intake by 25%, how you could reinvest that budget and those resources to just continue to build and improve customer experience, customer journey, to be able to delight your customers, you know, focus on more in-product, self-service, omni-channel. I mean, that's, you do some quick math, just hypothetically, if that saves you 1,000 tickets a month, that's 12,000 tickets a year, and maybe it's your internal cost is $100 a ticket. That's 1.2 million. I mean, you could do a bit with that, right? I mean, you could really drive some innovative initiatives. So, you know, that's the way that I would look at that. And you know, I would obviously, you know, you want to go validate the data for your own set of customers. Again, I go advocate for asking for customer feedback. Make sure in your surveys, whether it's, you know, it's within experience that you're capturing feedback, what can you do to improve? Could this issue have been resolved? Was there content available? This is gold in terms of insight, in terms of driving that continuous improvement into your customer experience and your customer journey.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to comment on that in a second. Let's go to the next slide, which I think adds a little bit more of a different avenue. If you can take us through this one, Irit, and then let's take that all in, what you just said about what does it really mean and how can you actually get to reducing a piece of this? Go ahead, Irit.
Great question, yeah. So what we asked further was, of the support calls, open the ticket, call support or something else, that you made in the past 12 months, what percentage of them were resolved by directing you to existing content, meaning knowledge base or portal or community or PDF? It could be anything basically. And here you see the answers. So users have stated 53% of times and leaders 58% of times. So what do you say, guys?
I mean, it sounds like it's validating the same point from before. It's not a big gap between users and experience and customer leaders, but it is actually interesting here that it's, if you are directed to the place, you will solve it. So it's really about getting the answer on your own, which is more about the high touch, low touch, Paul, I think. Of this can also be not just support, but it could be the CSM. Instead of them going to your customer support, And instead of you going to the customer success as a default, hey, I'm trying to adopt this product, I can't find things, and I've filed a support ticket, but I really want to get on with it. Who wants to make the CSM a knowledge hub of repeatable questions, right? What are your thoughts on that, Paul?
Yeah, no, I think it's something that we can all agree on, right? So, you know, it's a case of the fact that I think it validates the content we have out there is valid, right? The struggle is people are not finding it contextually, right? We're not mapping the content to the customer experience, right? So then I think I would want to go back and look at how we're sort of the signatures. I'm a big believer of signatures, right? So, you know, as you organize it and correlate your content, you bucketize it, you know, how deep within a signature can you go? How do you match that signature based on even when the customer's logging the ticket? I mean, if you think about it again, if you think about these soft landing zones, if you make it easier for a customer that if they weren't able to find, but as they're logging the ticket and they start describing it, you know, you're building out a signature, right? And then do signature mapping against your content base, present potential and content solutions as part of that ticket generating process. So I think it's about always looking hard at what is the data telling us, right? Understanding why did a customer miss it? What were the attributes? How do we improve? And this just continued sort of cycle of continuous improvement is super critical.
Yeah, I agree with you. One of the pieces we see with our work at Zoomin is when you see content as a signal of customers, users adopting content and continuing with their journey or getting the answers right, and then adopting and getting to health, that's something you can also use to then make sure that other people in their journey are supposed to use the same content at the same path in order to adopt. And it's the other side of this question. Let's go to the next slide and start summarizing. I think I love what Paul just said. We edited immediately because we are agile here. And what could you do with a 25% cut in support costs, right? So the main takeaway of this entire research, which was great, and we commend Frost Sullivan for partnering with us on, is if you have the right content and the right contextual answer, contextual is very important here, for the person where they're searching for what they're searching, then the UX is great, and then they don't have to go off their journey. And then why would they need to bug the CSM or file support tickets? And then at the end of the day, you're not just saving money, but also you're able to scale, right? What Paul and I will talk about maybe in a second is, or maybe even now, next year you might be growing by 20%. Are you going to linearly add 20% of people to CSM or into support? Or can you implement of the things we talked about here, which is a content-first approach, to actually reinvest money, not in just people and more people to manage, but actually to make them more productive and to give them a more interesting job, which is about elevating them to be strategic CSMs versus just an answering machine for where to find content. So that's something I think we talk about a lot, Paul. What are your thoughts on that as a way to scale?
Yeah, listen, I think whatever we can do to give our folks time back, right, is give our customers time back. We want to give our folks time back. How can we give them time back to work on more innovative initiatives that are going to improve customer experience, that are going to improve customer loyalty, improve customer retention? I've always found it so hard to work on the business when you're working in the business. And I go back to that previous slide to say, you know, it's the opportunity there to, if we can reduce our incoming volume, what would we do? You know, folks may be cynical and look at that and say, well, golly, I can reduce my budget by 25%. I look at it in terms of how do I leverage that 25% to go drive and influence higher retention rate, higher customer sat, higher customer loyalty, potential expansion opportunity, right? So, and then if I look at it internally, you know, how do I create a team of knowledge engineers, right? How do we use this as a pivot point to create new additional functions within the support ecosystem? Typically, support is the brain drain to other organizations, whether it be consulting or products or engineering. And a lot of that is because we haven't created a natural elevation and evolution of roles. So now being able to create a team that's focused on analytics, on understanding customer experience, knowledge engineers, you know, this now creates additional functions that are all focused around what? Around our customer experience. And what happens when our customers have a great, I go back to us as consumers, right? when I'm equally likely to switch brand for a crappy experience as I am for price, right? And I think at some level that is the same for B2B as well, right? So I think the more we can focus on delighting our customers, the more we can focus on providing them with a frictionless experience. And when they need help, listen, we should only ever be one click away, right? So how do we then orchestrate ourselves and organize ourselves and engineer ourselves so we can only be one click away? And through that click, we capture all of the context we need to provide a great experience to the customer.
Yeah, I love it. It's as we summarize this, it's basically that. It's about how technical content experience in B2B is lagging behind what we experience in day-to-day. And we know that when we're doing things towards it, as you said, new roles, trying to put content in the right place, but it's still astounding how big this of a money item it is, of a line item, and of the things that are really the gap still. And the second thing we saw is that the leaders, CXCS leaders, are really understand this, but we still believe that content first is the approach, not customer first. Go where the customer wants to be. Just, Wayne Gretzky 101, where skate where the puck's going to be, not where the puck is now, right? Okay, we're doing a lot of sports analogies here to the airport. So this is really about that. Where is the customer going in the journey? Don't tell them to go back to search in Google to find something. Actually, they're going to go to where they think something is going to be. Go there and be ready for them with the right answer, contextual to their journey. And the last one is, that's because the bottom line is we are humans, and human behavior tells us what it is, and we want a good experience, we want frictionless, and we're used to a standard already. And that's why if we go to the last slide, which is about, here's what I would do if I had the ability to cut 25%. I would start a party with all the customers, reinvest in it, and then people just adopt on their own, and products are easy. Now, that's maybe a little bit too utopic, but it really is about, we would love to hear back from the audience about what would you do if you're able to cut at least 25%, not the 53% of support costs and CSM time, and what would you reinvest in? And we want to compile a research about that as well and come back to you all with more information about it. But at the end of the day, it really is about customer first approach. It's about being them and letting them self-serve as the users have spoken. So that's the end of our webinar. Lots of great data and slides. I want to thank you, Reet. Thank you so much for helping us with this wonderful partnership. And I want to thank the guru of CX, CS, and support, Paul, for giving us your pearls of wisdom and lots of information.
Great to be
Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Along.
Thanks so much. And we'll have the report out in about a week with a lot more data points to everybody that you can use. And we're happy to help to understand and explain what we've seen from our clients and partners, how they've implemented reducing the 25%. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Have a great day, folks. Thank you.
All right.